All right, so for my field trip, I went to the Wichita Wildlife Refuge. It's in Lawton, Oklahoma. It's actually about 15, 20 minutes from where I grew up and lived. I've actually been over there a lot, um, but here we go. So the main attraction is Mount Scott, and Mount Scott is just north of the Lawton, Oklahoma, rising to a height of 2,464 feet. It's near Fort Sill, which is a military base in Lawton. Um, there are a lot of things to do at Mount Scott. It's a has a road that leads all the way to the top. It's probably like three miles circling all the way to the top. Um, you can visit it by car. You can walk if you want, or ride a bike. Hiking is allowed, although there's no formal trails, and the paved road is the only way up. And it's open from 6 a.m. to 9:30. Um, Mount Scott is like a really popular place to climb. Like I said, there's really not a whole lot of rules to do. You just kind of can like go down in there. There's some places that are pretty easy to hike, and then there's some that are a little harder because it's really a lot of big rocks. It's actually the second highest mountain in the Wichita Wildlife Refuge, which is like a lot of people don't know. But it's the one that's like actually accessible and you can go and actually see it. The other one, you can't really, you're not allowed to go see it. It's Mount Pinchot and is located in like a special reserved area where it is closed to the public. The one of the cool things about the wildlife refuge is the Holy City. It's still in Lawton. It's on 66 acres, and it's supposed to look like Israel during the biblical times. Inside the Holy City, you'll find several full-size buildings and structures, including like a temple, the Lord's Supper building, uh, a judgment hall, and several other things. Uh, you can also like explore the Calvary's Mount and the Garden of Gethsemane. In addition, uh, in this area, it is also the longest running Easter play called The Prince of Peace, which show started in 1937, and it was at an all-time high in 1939 when 2,250 visitors came, which then was a lot. Um, but actually, due to COVID, last year was the first year it didn't have an Easter play, which kind of broke the streak, I guess, which was a pretty wild thing. Um, Other attractions are lakes. There's a lot of small lakes. I actually have gone and kayak and fished a lot with my brother and some friends. And some of the small lakes are like Jed Johnson, Rush Lake, Lost Lake. Lost Lake and French Lake are the better of the small lakes to fish. All you need is a Oklahoma fishing license to fish them, and but then the main lakes are Lake Latonka, Elmer Thomas, and Ellsworth. Lake Latonka is the lake that's at the bottom of Mount Scott that you can see from the top, and it's a pretty. It's a smaller lake, but it's the biggest in this area. Um, it's pretty fun to go out there, and there's a lot of trails around these little lakes, and most of them you can't actually swim in, other than the main big lakes. You can't really swim in any of them. For the wildlife, in the Wichitas, there are buffalo, longhorns, elk, white-tailed deer, and some wild turkeys. The three native herds dominant in the Wichita Mountains are mainly the bison, the Rocky Mountain elk, and the white-tailed deer. A herd of the Texas Longhorn Kennel is maintained to preserve the cultural and historical legacy of this breed. You'll actually see a lot of Longhorn when you're driving through it, and bison as well. The bison were reintroduced as well as the elk and wild turkey. They were reintroduced to maintain the landscape and to keep the history of buffalo and the buffalo bison in this refuge because they were nearly extinct. They had to actually bring in some from New York Zoo to repopulate this area. The efforts to keep the major species in the wildlife where they're not in danger anymore is the main purpose for keeping these animals in there. Just to manage them and keep them healthy. And that's what the main source for those little lakes are because they're all in it through there. And then these are some of the things what I learned about Oklahoma from visiting the site. I kind of learned how beautiful Oklahoma's natural landscape is. It's not all just flat and with nothing there. There's so much free roaming wildlife throughout the refuge, which is pretty cool because you don't get to see a whole lot of that today. There's a lot of little lakes that are pretty cool and fun to hike around and fish and camp. The Holy City was something that I wasn't real familiar with before going to it, but after doing some of the research and looking up and seeing it in person is pretty cool to see. And then what makes it unique is that the beauty and the perspective of it. And this also shows how diverse the wildlife and mountains, lakes, open fields, and trees can be in Oklahoma. Um, Broader events in American history. This shows we just kill or do whatever we want and it will be gone. This is a prime example because they created this to keep these animals protected, and if we don't do that, then they will be gone. And then the last thing is that what I think somebody should know before visiting this is to do a little research on why it was created and what past generations have done or did for it to be created. I think that'd be pretty important. Just some basic stuff. Understand the significance of the refuge and what they went through to create it. And that's it.